We got season 5 out there. So check those out. They're all great interviews, very on point educational interviews. And you guys ready to go?
Let's do it.
Yeah. All
right. Start with the music.
Hey, welcome to M&A Science live. Putting together companies is complicated and taking them apart is even more complicated. On this podcast series, we interview leading M&A practitioners to learn lessons from their experience. Learning proven techniques is key to perfecting your M&A practice. I'm your host, Isam Patel, CEO and founder of Dealroom. Myself, I spent 10 years as an M&A advisor. After seeing a bunch of industry-wide challenges, I shifted focus to 2012, chased my dream to build the greatest software to manage M&A. Joining me today is Muhammad Azfar, managing partner at Auctus Capital Partners, a boutique investment bank based in Chicago. And also Julia Rollins, who heads client success at Dealroom. She works with a range of clients from small boutique firms to Fortune 500, even Fortune 50 to improve their M&A process. Today, we're speaking with Mo about his firm Octus and how they adapted their M&A process into a more virtual environment even before COVID-19. And we wanted to get his insight on the different tools and techniques they've implemented, how people have adapted to this work style, and the differences made in their deals. Full disclosure, Octus is a client of Dealroom, and we're actively involved in helping them improve their process. So normally I'm giving bankers a hard time about how inefficient they are and how behind they are at times, but not in this case. This is an exception.
An early adopter.
Yeah, Mo's been working with us for about 4 or 5 years, 5 years now.
Yep.
And very different view. He's part of the new generation, forward thinking in terms of M&A, information architecture, and project management principles. So let's kick off with a brief background on Auctus Capital Partners with some details about corporate culture, work-life, specializations.
Yeah, absolutely. Be happy to. Thanks for having me, Kisan. Great to see you as well, Julia. So we're an investment banking firm focused on the lower end of the middle market. The sectors that we spend time on are technology and services, business services, healthcare and life sciences, and some industrials. The way we define lower mid market is, businesses generally doing about, call it 5 million in revenue to about $100 million in revenue. Our business is, I'd say probably 50% sell side M&A, and the rest is a mixture of debt advisory, growth equity, and general kind of growth advisory services. It's as far as Octus's culture, we're a very kind of fast-paced, client-centric, sort of environment where one of our core tenets is always looking to add value to clients in a meaningful way, and transparency and communication with clients, throughout the process and early in the process to make sure that we're, managing expectations and delivering the best outcomes. And, it's a fairly fast-paced environment, right? We're working on multiple mandates, simultaneously. So it's kind of all hands on deck.
So let's talk about, how ACP managed deals originally and sort of what prompted you to start virtualizing your process.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, as we were growing the firm and started to get more and more mandates, working out of spreadsheets just became really difficult, right? So in many ways, it was a sort of a traditional deal management model where we would have, our Monday morning pipeline meetings and reviews. And I found that over time, as we were getting more mandates, it became, it felt a little, siloed, right? So eventually we, migrated to a CRM platform to try and get a little bit more visibility around what's happening on different projects, client communication and so forth. What I learned was operating in that sort of an environment, things are changing on deals almost on a daily basis, particularly in lower mid market. And it didn't really create an environment that allowed us to, foster collaboration and pull the best, talent and intellectual capital across the board from all the different individuals. So we realized that we needed, something that was a bit more advanced, where we could kind of highlight, all the key priorities on deals and across the organization. Just because you think about the nature of the work, it's complex, and there's a lot of critical tasks within our dependencies, and requires collaboration from different individuals that are working on mandates at the same time. So a lot of times when the deal team has their heads down, it's difficult. They can't see, they don't have necessarily an eagle's eye view, so they can miss some really critical things throughout the deal process that are not visible to them, right? So we recognize that as time kind of progressed, and we're working on multiple mandates, and we needed something a bit more advanced than just kind of a weekly, Monday morning pipeline review and just the CRM.
Okay, so like Excel is pretty clunky. I think that's pretty well known for running an M&A process, but what's the net effect on your deals and relations to your clients?
Well, you mean in terms of just working in Excel, or just through just the CRM, or just be more specific?
Yeah, because I get there's a level of inefficiencies because, hey, here's this tool, but the reality is there's a lot of companies that do that today. And,
Sure.
And I'm trying to get a sense of, what have you seen as sort of the net impact, especially as you change your model?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, it's, it gives, the net impact is, I think, incremental impact, just an aggregation of doing, small things on time and getting efficiencies on a larger scale. It's pretty significant, right? I mean, you have more, kind of task level responsibility and accountability that you have a bit more, visibility around, and not just you, but other people on the team that are working on the mandates also have a bit more visibility around that. So from that perspective, I think it's been really important, and it's been beneficial. And again, as I said earlier in the conversation, I think that as things develop and as priorities and key priorities change, you need to sort of, prioritize your tasks, and certain projects require a little bit more attention and somebody else's attention than others. So from that perspective, if you have, a tool that allows you to kind of look at everything and you can update real time, then you can stay out of your inbox from that perspective. And then you can kind of look at your key priorities for the day across all the deals and across the operations. I think it has a significant impact because you're more responsive to your clients. You can kind of foresee some of the issues and challenges. You can, discuss those, if there's something that's lagging from a data request perspective, right? I mean, if you're falling behind on something like that, you can get on top of some of those issues. And over time, I think it makes you more efficient and more responsive to your clients' needs.
I got it. So I'm hearing allocate resources. I hear about being responsive, sort of increase or shortening that time.
Yep.
And then also progress tracking, general efficiencies.
Exactly.
When was the actual point when you realized like we need to do something better?
Yeah, I think it was, 12 months in operations. I realized that we needed a little bit more of a holistic approach. And it came from just knowing, it was actually from, a significant sell side M&A mandate that we were working on, that, one of our individuals missed something very key, which sort of, it wasn't necessarily a broken process, but kind of set us back to, remarketing and re-engaging other buyers. So it was really more around just the fact that what we're doing is consequential for us, and the outcomes are very consequential for our clients. And we need more of a framework or holistic approach versus doing kind of, all these tasks in a very manual way. It's difficult to keep track of everything, right? So I think it was one of those, I think it was a natural kind of evolution, but the aha moment was, just sitting around and saying, how did we kind of miss this, issue around this particular contract with this particular client that we should have discussed very early on, that we knew that this was going to be an issue. So I think that was kind of I guess you could say, the big aha moment.
So kind of a mix between just some general growing pains, being small and competitive, so those type of things. Yeah,
Exactly.
Julia, you're welcome to chime in and ask some questions. You got the same outline I do, so I'm willing to share the interview mic with you.
All right, thanks.
Do you want to talk about just the implementation of Dealroom and Agile into your everyday deal management and internal operations?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, I think when we were talking about and looking at different kind of data room service providers, everything that I found from a cost perspective and just from a UI UX architecture perspective didn't really make sense because then you have a data room, then you still kind of need to have your project management spreadsheet to kind of set aside figure out all of your priorities and so forth. So that was one of the things that really resonated with me, Kisan, when you talked about Dealroom as a platform. And as far as the implementation, I thought it was fairly seamless because it was really kind of hands-on from you trying to kind of talk about Agile as a process, and and just not just from a deal management perspective, but looking at it across the operations. So the fact that it integrates with, Salesforce, Slack, and just really kind of keeps you out of the inbox was really interesting. I thought that, you sitting down, excuse me, and then, with some of the execution team members and talking about, what is it that you want this platform to do, and kind of going back and taking it to the implementation team, kind of spending some of that quality time, I think from an implementation perspective was really helpful to go back and take that feedback. And then really just the hands-on training over that 2-week period leading up to the daily stand-ups, which we've adopted and still continue to practice. So I thought overall it was it kind of went off without a hitch.
What talk about company culture? Like, how did it affect that at all?
Yeah, so I think from a culture perspective, just getting in the habit and kind of, I don't want to use the word forcing people, but just getting in the habit of establishing the focus for the day and becoming more efficient in terms of, okay, what are my top, kind of 3 or 4 key priorities for the day? These are the things that I have to knock out and accomplish. And just having not one of those kind of long drawn out meetings, but just a quick kind of, check in. I thought that was very helpful. So just, again, like I said, the daily stand-up, which is really more of an agile sort of a methodology, right? And then using that approach just towards or that framework in terms of how you not only manage deals, but how you kind of look at the operations as well. It's, I think from an efficiency standpoint, it's added a lot of, value to what we're doing, right? In terms of looking at a deal or a project, getting a good understanding of and kind of characterizing it of the situation and or that particular deal. Really understanding where the problems are that you can foresee and where the roadblocks are, if you will, in terms of, the timeline and the resources that you're going to allocate towards it. Building out from there, we generally build out kind of a base case and a worst case and a best case, right? And you look at all those implications of what those options are. Kind of try to the best of your ability, in a way you're conjecturing, but you try to predict the best outcomes for each of those scenarios, right? And then you go into execution mode. So if you kind of look at deals the same way, and if you look at deals in that fashion with your team, and if you look at anything across the operations in that fashion, I think you find that it keeps you more honest and focused on what is it that you need to really be paying attention to. And it just kind of drives a culture of efficiency, because you don't have dedicated individuals for each sort of specific task, right? You don't have a dedicated marketing person, you don't have a dedicated you don't have a 10-person compliance team on each project, right? So I'm talking more in kind of in a boutique environment where the organization is fairly flat, but everybody has functional responsibilities, everybody has project-related responsibilities, but at the same time, in today's environment, many senior people are kind of cross-functional. So I think it keeps you really focused on where you want to be, the most efficient and then an effective use of your time and resources, if that makes sense.
So focus, transparency, and accountability.
Mm-hmm.
are probably the three key drivers in terms of how it may have changed culture. Well, one of
Yep,
the things I always hear from companies is change is always a big challenge. It doesn't matter
right.
your company size, doesn't
It
matter
is.
whatever. Nobody wants to change. Everybody
Yep,
is set in their ways. They're comfortable, and
right.
I'm curious to know what made you, because we've worked with other banks, and it's really difficult to create that kind of change in investment banking environment unless the
Right,
whole team's on board, which is really difficult because there's
right.
more of that cascading type of leadership management. So I'm curious to
Sure,
know, like,
sure.
what was the key drivers for you to prompt this change?
Yeah, I think it just in that kind of agile framework that I just kind of ran through. I think the key that most people miss is you have to kind of start with the core beliefs and values, right? So the underlying assumption is that the people, and if you haven't confirmed that, then perhaps they're not the right people on the team. And I know that sounds a bit harsh, but the people on your team have to, for the most part, share the same beliefs and values. And hopefully your values and the organization's values are aligned with what their values and objectives are as well. So I think kind of securing that buy-in, and it becomes a little bit, you have to do it piece by piece. I can't say that it was an easy thing for us, frankly, because generally people are, you know, people don't like change, right? I mean, people are very comfortable and they're kind of creatures of habit. So for some, for some folks, I think it was a lot easier. And for others, I think we had to do it, almost piece by piece in a way, and kind of bring them along. But it all starts with, if the goal is to grow as an organization, if the goal is to deliver value to clients, if the goal is to get, take on more mandates and getting them completed in a timely fashion, meeting and exceeding your clients' expectations, if you have that culture of, hard work, if you, again, all those things, all these things sort of tie in. I think that, over time, you can kind of tie it all back to what is it that our collective goal is as an organization that we're trying to do. And all these things, albeit temporarily, these are kind of pain points because a lot of people view them as distractions or their problems. In the grand scheme of things, and in the larger picture, they're going to help those individuals get closer to their goals within the organization, if that makes sense. And it's more qualitative in nature, so there's no kind of beating people up over the over the head with a stick to try and say, hey, you have to do this, because over time, if you can't get their buy-in, if they don't do it for their own reasons, then you're going to end up in a situation where they'll do it just because there's somebody kind of they might get reprimanded, or there might be some consequences for not doing it or following the system or protocol. But over time, I think it's better to kind of tie it into what their objectives are, in my view.
I got you. So sort of get alignment on what they're trying to achieve in terms of why the change would help them. I like what you mentioned,
Right,
piece by piece, that you don't, here's not a 180 turn, but it's,
right,
because I know you made a lot of changes that I worked with you on where they were incremental. I think we did a little bit different because we started with some technology first, and then
right.
we started looking at some of the practice points around it. What was there anything, if you were to go back and do it again, like how you may reapproach things?
um, yeah, I'd say that it's you have to kind of contextualize things and look at the resources available as a small firm to you, as opposed to a larger, kind of more established firm. And that goes across the board, from technology and tools, and just a whole other sort of set of resources. And I think it's really important to not go for the platinum edition of every technology tool that's out there. Even though some of the larger organizations that are more well established, the SaaS businesses do a great job at selling those products and services, they might not be the most appropriate set of tools for your company at the scale that you're. And we experience that with marketing automation. We experience that with just CRM. We experienced that initially before we moved to Dealroom with the data room service provider that we had. So there's, you just have to kind of figure out where you are and what is the best set of tools available to you, as opposed to going for like the top tier of products or technology, because you might end up spending a lot more time, resources trying to make those tools work for your business model and your processes, if that makes sense. So if I was to go back and do it differently, I'd say I'd start with kind of thinking about where we are today, evaluate very thoroughly the alternatives. It's absolutely okay to not go with an established brand name that's raised multiple rounds of venture financing, that has unlimited marketing budgets. Do your research and talk to a lot of the peers within the industry, kind of think outside the box a little bit, and go for, try to find the tools that are more out of the box and more cost effective, as opposed to taking presumably the gold standard in the industry and trying to make it work for you. Because
Are you saying you wouldn't cut Salesforce a check? Are you saying you wouldn't cut Salesforce a big check again? Is that what you're trying to say?
Not after all the checks that I've cut. No, I think I'm okay with it now. I was trying to avoid naming any specific names, but
I can name whoever I want because it's my podcast. But you're totally fine. I admit you from any liability around that. So I before we jump into tools, because I think that's what's pretty cool about your company is the setup that you ended up with, because it is really different than what a traditional investment bank operates on. I want to talk about the methodology and project management, because I started working with your firm when I was basically doing the underlying research of the book I published, Agile M&A. And I wanted to take concepts of Agile project management that I'm learning and validated with the corporate development environment at companies like Google and Atlassian. And I wanted to use your company as an experiment, right? So I went there and I interviewed with your various departments and went through, understood what their pain points and challenges were, presented it to your team, and we sort of discussed what different solutions. I know we introduced a handful of techniques, some stuck, some didn't. Can you talk a little bit about some of those things? And I don't know, just be unbiased about it, man. Tell us what didn't work out either.
Yeah, I think, from an execution perspective, I think just the approach of using, bringing, Agile to the M&A process, and just looking at it from a different lens, I thought was very interesting. And that's how you've kind of architected the platform. V1 of the platform, I think we had issues with adoption because you're still building a lot of the features and functionalities. So at the time when certain folks were, that weren't super well versed in technology, were trying to get on and figure out, okay, how do I kind of manage my daily tasks through this? And how do we kind of log new requests and so forth? Some of them had a little bit of a challenge with that. But so that was a little bit of a challenge. I think where we are now is over time, right? And you have to kind of get acclimated with whatever tool it is that you're using. It's become a lot more kind of ingrained in the daily kind of work life, if you will, for a lot of the individuals that are working on mandates, where, assigning kind of requests straight through the platform, getting notifications, again, so you can kind of stay out of your inbox, and those kind of constant reminders, high priority, low priority, assigning those requests to clients to kind of, furnish the data requests. And then you don't have to sit there and, kind of manually send an email to the client. And then it automatically kind of reminds them, hey, this is, a week overdue, and this is something we need in order to put the book together, or whatever the case is. I think those are the features that I think that have been pretty helpful. But again, I think it just comes down to, everybody has a different kind of style, and some people are very, I guess, antiquated in the way they like to do things. They like writing things down on a piece of paper and kind of putting it in, on the wall in front of them, and that's okay. So, I think it's just kind of across the board, but most of the time it works when you really kind of pay attention, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, that's understandable with technology. If we go back to like Agile and just techniques, just specifically around Agile, was there anything that just worked really well that you saw a lot of value from?
I think are you talking from an operational management perspective, or just from an M&A perspective and deal management?
Both, either or.
Yeah, I mean, I think the framework of just, here's kind of the 4 or 5-step process. So, rather than just doing, because we encourage people to think on their own, and rather than kind of waiting for somebody to assign tasks to them, and be creative in their thinking and anticipate problems, right? And try to foresee the issues before they blow up in your face, if you will. So I think just that kind of an approach towards problem solving, towards their day, I think that's, definitely helped a lot in terms of making people more efficient and being independent in their thinking, and adopting it as a mindset. So again, it's sort of a constant reinforcement. But I think the overall approach has worked. And what we try to do is use kind of real life examples that, as things come up on deals and or throughout the course of the week, on one-on-one interactions with individuals, and or in group meetings, to use those as kind of teaching moments, if you will, by asking some more, asking some specific questions around, and soliciting and creating that environment that, solicits feedback and collaboration, or facilitates that, to actually, kind of open the floor and the forum to everybody that's a participant. Because again, as I said before, a fairly flat organization, to then actually ask, how would you approach this, and what do you think this person missed? And there has to be a certain element of, psychological safety that's associated with it, so people don't feel like they're, being put in a corner, if you will. And I think that's built over time. So it's a lot of, moving pieces, but just as you go through it one by one, and if you go through it time and time, I think it over time becomes kind of second nature, because people start to change the way they look at things. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, I guess I was curious some more like specific techniques, like, stand-ups was one thing. I know you guys were sort of a new thing to approach, taking like a backlog approach, the way you prioritize things, stuff like that. That's a little bit more mechanical. And I'm trying to get the folks listening to this to get understanding of like pretty tangible things that they can actually apply to their own projects. You know what I mean?
For sure. Yeah. So I think stand-ups is definitely one. And now that we're operating virtually like a lot of the rest of the world, I think that, the daily check-in, the frequency is increased. So we with certain key, kind of team members, if you will, that have more, I guess, critical tasks with them, we make it a point to sort of do check-ins, 3 times a day at least. And it doesn't have to be a long kind of, 30-minute, an hour long conversation. It's just, a quick kind of check-in throughout the day, communicate throughout the day, and then you have your set sort of times. So we find that at beginning of the day, middle of the day, and end of the day, check-in with those key staff members to make sure that, okay, what are you working on today? How are you progressing on these 3 things that's supposed to do? Is it backlog? Are we going to be able to get it out? Do you need more time? And then at the end of the day, and if that 6 o'clock deadline is getting pushed to 7, as long as we know ahead of time that, hey, and we communicated it to whoever the receiving party is, if it was time sensitive, that we told you that it was, it'd be there by 6, but it's really going to be, I'm running a little behind because a call ran late or whatever. So those are kind of, that's another technique, trying to stay out of, we get a deluge of emails every day. So I encourage people to stay out of their inbox, because it's inevitable that you're going to miss something, right? A lot of times you're in the middle of something, you get a phone call from a client, you get a phone call from a coworker, you forgot to write or log your kind of task that you needed to do, that kind of came up, because the phone call that you received had a task associated with it. So, and that's something that's a little bit more urgent. So it's just those kinds of best practices that allow you to kind of stay more organized, and again, stay out of the inbox as much as you can, especially these days, is what I try to tell people and reinforce, because it's easier to collaborate across whatever project management tool you're using, or in Slack, or whatever chat function that you're using. And a lot of times it's better to just have a quick 10-minute phone call versus sending 5 emails, right? So I always encourage people to just pick up the phone and call the other person outside of the check-ins if you have a quick question, or send messages. Those are kind of the best practices that we're utilizing that seem to be, working well for people as they're working remotely as well.
That's a pretty cool summary. Hey, if anybody has questions, feel free to post them, because I'm running out of questions here, and I want to throw it over to Julia here in a minute, because she's actually going to show you the setup. We're not going to show you Mo's exact setup because he's got some live deals in there. But we're going to show you something really similar to it. to give you an idea of what that looks like, going from a tool set of email, Excel, data room to just chat tool like Slack or Teams, and a project management tool like Dealroom and whatever else. So we're going to do that here shortly. Now, Wakuba, if any questions come up, could you just tell me to sort of wrap things up here, what the difference between the traditional approach, moving to more of an agile based approach, how it's impacted your firm, and if it's helped you deliver value to your clients or not?
Yeah, absolutely. So to sum it up, I think that most of what I've experienced is that most investment banks, professional services firms, anytime you're operating in a project-based environment, your deal teams a lot of times are operating in silos. So I think and you're not probably getting the best out of your talent and people across the board, right? Because you might have a lot of very talented people that are your coworkers and colleagues. They might have a relationship. They might have met somebody that at a networking event that's interested in a particular type of mandate that you're working on that your colleague doesn't really know about. There's a lot of value in just sort of, leveraging everybody's talent and capabilities and creating that environment where it facilitates that. So the more you can kind of foster that type of an environment, the better off you'll be, especially when you're working in an environment like where we are, right? The second thing is, on most transactions, it's inevitable that you're going to have issues that no matter how much you try to ferret out deal killers in the beginning of the process, particularly if you're working in lower mid market, it's inevitable that you will be, you will have some level of surprise or some level of setback. And it always ends up taking longer than what you anticipate on the front end in terms of getting a deal across the finish line. So the more you can sort of, as you go through the deal process and where you are in the deal process, the more you can kind of utilize that checklist or that framework to make sure that, and set your milestones based on, and the key priorities based on how things are progressing, as opposed to taking kind of, hey, my VP is going to do this and, he's got it covered. And, my associate's going to do, all the modeling work and I'll check in with them once in a while. And I'm just going to kind of check in with the client once a week to give them a progress update. The more hands-on and the more of that sort of a framework or approach you can use to evaluate, where things are they moving according to the project plan and timeline that you'd anticipated, if not where things might get shifted, I think the better off you are. And I think Agile is probably that framework that allows you to do that.
Great. I really like the points you brought up through this interview around transparency, accountability, and responsiveness. I want to turn it over to Julia to actually do something a little different and just show you, because some people like looking at tools, some people don't, but just kind of show you what it looks like in terms of a setup that we help build for Mo and his company. And if anybody else has any questions, feel free to ask it. Mo, you can hang out. I know you got another call on the hour, but you're welcome to share some thoughts as well.
Sure. Yeah, I'll hang out for a bit. We'll turn it over to Julia, and I'll drop off here in a little bit since I have to get ready for the next call.
All right. Awesome. Well, yeah, I can go ahead and share my screen to give you a little bit better perspective on what Kisan and Mo were talking about. So this is our tool Dealroom that Mo and his group have been using. And this is an example of a room that I have set up. So I know Mo uses it internally as well, but this is set up for more of a sell side process. So again, just
your
using...
Q&A thing is covering part of your screen.
Oh, sorry. Okay, there we go. Yeah, so this is set up for a sell side. And like Mo mentioned, instead of using email and Excel trackers and a data room, it's just really helpful to have it all put into one space. So everyone that's involved with the deal can log in, see what they need to see the documents they need to see, and then communicate through here as well. So like I said, this is set up for a sell side process. So I have these different diligence lists in here. And the main one I'm going to focus on is the pre-launch data request. So this is going to be those different diligence items you need getting the deal kicked off. So instead of, again, kind of dropping into a data room and updating a tracker and emailing it back and forth, you can do all of it in one platform. So you can see here all of these different priorities for the tasks as well. So this is something that they mentioned when they were going over agile techniques, is always having your high priority items. And this is easily communicated internally and then with your client or whoever is externally viewing this list as well. So it's really nice. Like I said, you can have all of that organized here. And then because everything is on the same platform as your documents, your data room tab, if you open up each request here, you're able to attach documents that are already stored in your data room. So again, just having everything in one spot and then the communication around this as well. So if there are any comments or questions, it happens in real time. Again, not waiting for a batched email to take place. You can quickly leave a comment or update a single task in one spot. Same thing then for creating new requests as well. So it is nice if you need to update anything or there is something else that needs to be added to the diligence list, you can quickly add that. So again, you can create it to the business overview and then put on a priority as well. So always being able to have those priority items added to the list as you go. And another technique that's nice about Dealroom is the ability to drag and drop to reorder. So this is nice too. If you're having a daily stand-up, you can organize the tasks by priority each day. So your highest priority items are always at the top. So I think that's something else that's super helpful and is flexible about the platform, being able to adjust to a more agile process as well. And then the third thing I wanted to show was that integration with Slack and the chat tool. So again, staying out of your inbox and actually having different updates from your deal be pushed into a channel where then you can have, conversation happen in the chat regarding the specific items without having to go back to an email or sort through your inbox. It's just nice to have that thread that you're able to reference. Is there anything, Kisan or Mo, you wanted to add on kind of that high-level overview?
You did a good job. I like it. One might be interesting is that document view, because
Sure.
sometimes explaining how the product works is a little challenging because a lot of people are so familiar with data rooms, and I think the name Dealroom is so similar to the data room. But it's interesting to think of the product as two layers, where you have a project management layer that integrates into the data room, and then you have a data room layer that integrates back into the project management layer. And I know I get probably more feedback around that from corporate clients, but it's pretty interesting and useful to sort of have all this integration at your fingertips, so you don't really lose anything anywhere.
Yeah. So just to add on that, I opened up a document that was in the data room part. And right away, when I click over here, I can see where this document has been attached to other requests. So it is nice if you have maybe repeat requests coming in during the process, you're able to quickly see what this document fulfilled prior. And then additionally, you can create a request from a document as well. So if you're looking at a document on the platform, there is a finding of some sort, you could quickly add it to your list that you're working on, and then add a title, ask a question, assign someone, and then update that priority of this task as well. So it is nice, just kind of the one-stop shop for your documents and then your diligence items as well.
Cool. Did you have any other thoughts on that? Questions or anybody? I think you're good. We can probably pop out of that.
Okay.
And just kind of close things up, Mo. I really appreciate you taking the time here with us today.
Thanks for having me.
I know I kind of drug you to share some of your. Now you can see crystal clear on your video. But, no, I appreciate you sharing some of the experience and working with your firm. I know it's been a while that we worked together, so it's nice to just hear about some of the things that you worked on, and just kind of interesting with just the nature of adopting technology early,
right,
and methodologies around the technology. So nice to give that visibility to others. But hey, thanks for your time. Anybody else? Just a reminder on that conference. We put a post up there. It's mascience.com. Check it out if you want to learn more techniques from other practitioners. We have a full lineup of great speakers and got some fun happy hour events in that conference as well. Any other final words, Julia?
No, this was great. Thanks again, Mo. It's always nice to have someone that's actually used Dealroom and Agile techniques come on and talk. So thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you guys for having me and the continued support. And obviously, we're big fans of Dealroom and the fact that you're always there to answer questions. And it's been great working together and love where you guys are going with the product. So really appreciate you guys taking care of us.
Awesome. Hey, thanks for your time again.
All right, take care.